Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What does it mean to be a millionaire in America today? You've probably seen headlines like 18% of American households are millionaires. But dig a little deeper and you'll see that the picture isn't quite so simple. Does that number include your house? What does it exclude? And more importantly, what can that money even do for you? Well, that's what we're going to unpack today. Let's start with the broad view. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances as processed by DQYDJ, about 18% of U.S. households have a net worth of $1 million or more. But the median U.S. household net worth is nowhere near that. It's around $192,000. And here's the kicker. Once you exclude home equity, the median drops all the way down to $57,900. So why such a big difference? Well, for many families, their home is the single biggest asset they own. And outside the very top percentiles, for many families, their home represents half or even more of their total net worth. So if 18% of households are millionaires when you include home equity, the number that are millionaires once you exclude the home value drops significantly, likely into the single digits, in the 8% to maybe 10% range. Now let's be clear, your home absolutely counts in your net worth and as a piece of your wealth. But people so often ask this question, what is the typical net worth excluding home value? Because they want to isolate the portion of a portfolio that can be used to generate income. Think about it this way. Let's say we have an individual that has a $200,000 home and an $800,000 investment portfolio. That can provide a real retirement income. But let's flip that around. Let's say we have another individual who has an $800,000 home with only $200,000 in investable assets. Now you're looking at a very different income stream. If we use a 4.7% withdrawal rate, the first individual would be able to generate nearly $38,000 a year in retirement income. The second individual would only have a little bit over $9,000. Both households show the same $1 million net worth on paper, but one produces almost 4 times the annual income of the other. This is why separating out investable assets from home equity can give a much clearer picture on the lifestyle your wealth could support in retirement or if you were to step away from the workforce. That's why I recommend running 2 net worth statements, one that includes your home and one that excludes it. That second number is going to tell you how much income you can realistically draw from your investments once you step away from the workforce. It tells you the type of lifestyle you're going to be able to support. But what about retirees specifically? By retirement age, you've likely had many years to save and invest, so these account balances should look quite different. Wealth Tender's breakdown shows that for people aged 65 to 69, the median investable net worth peaks at about $238,000. At the 75th percentile, the number jumps to around $784,000. And at the 90th percentile, it reaches about $2.3 million. At that level, home equity tends to shrink to around 20 or 30% of total wealth. So high net worth families tend to lean much more heavily into financial assets that can produce income. The vast majority of wealth in America sits with people on the brink of retirement or already retired. And that makes sense. They've had an entire career to save and invest and build up assets. Here's the cleanest look we have using the Survey of Consumer Finances data that excludes primary residence. In the 75th percentile, investable assets tend to hover around $500,000, maybe $700,000, or even close to $800,000, depending on age. Once we get to the 90th percentile, we see that nearly all of these age groups are hovering around at least $2 million. Now here's what that really means. For retirees, $1 million in investable assets, excluding home equity, typically falls somewhere between the 75th and the 90th percentiles, meaning that $1 million sits around the 78th percentile for many age groups. About 22% of households in these brackets have 1 million or more in financial assets outside of their primary residence. So in other words, about 1 in 5 retirees has crossed that 7-figure threshold in terms of pure investable wealth. Now, what if we were to narrow this down a bit further? If you were only looking at individual retirement accounts like IRAs or 401ks, the number that have $1 million or more drops sharply to about 3% of retirees. And even those numbers are likely understated. Why? Because data from these surveys looks at one account and one brokerage at a time. If you've got $500,000 at Vanguard and another $500,000 at Fidelity, you do have $1 million in investable assets. But you won't show up as a millionaire on either firm's report. Even if you had 2 accounts with the same institution that each had $500,000, you still wouldn't be counted as a millionaire on their report. So unless these accounts are consolidated, it's impossible to capture the full picture. Now here's where it gets interesting. This might sound like a really simple and straightforward question. What's the typical net worth? Or how many millionaires are out there? But honestly, it's surprisingly hard to answer. Why? Because it's incredibly difficult to track. First and foremost, accounts are incredibly fragmented. Most people have retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, bank accounts, maybe a high-yield savings account, even some cash or an old pension, a 401k from a previous employer, maybe a trust or even a small business or a crypto wallet, often spread across multiple institutions. And here's the catch. There's no single reporting requirement that forces all of this information to be consolidated. For instance, there's no line on your tax return that forces you to list your net worth. So in practice, your wealth is likely scattered across multiple institutions and multiple accounts, and there's no central system that forces you to pull it all together. There's no universal reporting requirement. Unlike wages, which get reported to the IRS on a W-2 or a 1099, there's no requirement for household assets and household balances to be centrally reported in a way that's available for public statistics. Tax returns might capture some of the picture in terms of interest, dividends, or perhaps required minimum distributions from retirement accounts, but they certainly can't capture the full picture. Surveys rely on self-reporting. Large data sets rely on self-reporting, and high net worth households are often underrepresented or often refuse to give exact values. Also, surveys tend to top code extreme values. Meaning if a billionaire were to happen to respond, their exact net worth doesn't get reported. Instead, it gets reported as being above a certain threshold. Maybe that threshold is $30 million. That's great for protecting privacy, but it does mean we lose some precision in the top area. There's also valuation issues. Illiquid assets like private equity in a business, collectibles, real estate other than primary homes are often hard to value consistently. There is even a gray area when it comes to financial assets themselves. How is someone valuing their pension when asked about their net worth? Or how is someone valuing their life insurance? Does it have a cash value? There is no consistent way to report these items when it comes to net worth. And even newer financial assets like crypto, which are often traded outside of traditional financial assets, can add to the noise here. And if you think about it, there are really large incentives to stay private. Most people value privacy, whether that's for safety reasons, whether it's for tax purposes, whether it's just personal discretion. So there's often a natural incentive to underreport or simply not disclose your total wealth. And honestly, you don't build up your net worth to broadcast it. You build it up for your own security and your family's future, not to file it away in some national database for everyone to see. And finally, there's sampling and timing problems. Net worth is volatile. The markets move quite a bit, and surveys are done periodically. This data can lag, and even once it's reported, it can be out of date pretty quickly. Think about it. Has anyone in any official capacity ever asked you to total up all of your accounts, all your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts across all institutions to give your total net worth? Highly unlikely. And even if they did, how accurate was your reporting? Did you take the time to look up every single account, or did you simply give your best guess? This is why these numbers are just estimates and not gospel. And honestly, there might be some blind spots in self-reporting of net worth. Consider that there are about 132 million households in the US, yet there are roughly 32 million forgotten or completely untouched 401ks, collectively holding over $2 trillion in assets. So maybe before we start comparing numbers, it's worth asking, have I really captured all of my accounts? Or taking a moment to pause and think, are there any accounts that I've forgotten about with an old employer? If so, you might receive a little retirement bonus. Most of the numbers you hear about wealth in America come from one source, the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. This survey is run every 3 years, and they tend to survey around 4,000 to 6,500 households. And here's the thing, they do attempt to oversample wealthier households to really pinpoint where wealth is. Then they use statistical weighing to take these few thousand responses to extrapolate it across around 132 million households to represent the entire country. And generally, it is considered the gold standard for U.S. wealth research because it attempts to capture everything from checking accounts to 401ks to mortgages to small businesses and even the value of your car. But remember, it's still a survey. It's not a full census, and it relies on self-reporting. So at best, these are just estimates. And here's a final point to consider. Wealth isn't just a number. It's a social and relative concept. So much of what we perceive about wealth is about comparison. It's not just about the number in your bank account. It's what that money allows you to do, what kind of life it allows you to live, and how it stacks up to the society and people around you. Having $1 million net worth in the rural Midwest versus San Francisco paints two completely different pictures of lifestyle and comfort. In one case, it might mean a spacious home and a lot of breathing room within your budget. In another, it might mean a modest apartment and a paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle. Numbers can also be deceiving across countries. Let's say you have 5.9 million Philippine pesos or 8.9 million Indian rupees. That may sound like a fortune, but when you convert it, it's about 100,000 US dollars. Where you live determines how far it goes. Context matters. Economists call this relative income or positional goods. The meaning of wealth doesn't just depend on the raw number in your bank account, but rather what it buys you compared to those around you. So if you just want the stats, here's the big picture. About 18% of US households are millionaires if you include home equity. If you exclude home equity, it's closer to 8 to 10% overall of the entire population. Among retirees, about 20 to 25% have $1 million in investable assets, but only about 3% have that much in retirement accounts alone. And ultimately, the value of that $1 million depends on context, where you live, how you spend, and how secure it makes you feel. And more importantly than any comparison, what are some actionable steps you can do to work on your net worth? Number one is to track your net worth regularly. And I would do it in two ways. I would have one version that includes my home value and one that excludes it. That second version is going to give you a clearer picture of the assets you can eventually turn into income once you step into retirement, presuming you want to age in place and stay in your home. How often should you do this? Quarterly can be a sweet spot. Once every 3 months can give you a clear picture of progress without getting too lost in market noise. Otherwise, annually for big picture. Once a year, you can do a full deep dive, update all your accounts, your assets, your debts, and that way you can compare your year-over-year progress. And hold on to these annual statements because it's nice to see the progress you make over time. Number two, don't fixate on $1 million. It's a nice round number, but by itself, it's a meaningless goal. What you need to figure out is how much income you need your assets to generate to live the life you want to. So that means figure out your personal number. Ask, what kind of life do I want to live in retirement? Figure out how much that costs, and from there, figure out how much of a portfolio you need to support that lifestyle. That may be more than $1 million, it may be less than $1 million, but what matters is you figure out your number. Focus on income, not just assets. Translate your investments into a rough annual income using a withdrawal rate. Figure out which withdrawal rate you're comfortable with. Maybe that's 3.5%, maybe it's 4%, maybe it's 4.7% to see how much your portfolio could realistically provide. Next, control the controllables. You can't control what the market does day to day, but what you can control is your savings rate, your spending habits, and how diversified your investments are. Markets will rise and fall. One year, your investable assets may go above 7 figures. Another year, it may dip below it. Don't get too hung up on the market swings. What matters is that you're making progress. Contextualize your wealth. Remember, location, cost of living, healthcare expenses will all shape what your money can buy. $1 million in the Midwest is very different than $1 million in the heart of New York City. So the real takeaway isn't whether your net worth crosses some magic 7-figure line. It's the lifestyle that you can build from your investable assets. Don't measure yourself against headlines. Measure yourself against your own goals. And remember, all of these statistics presented are best estimates, not exact values. So take them with a grain of salt. So next time you see a headline about millionaires, don't simply take it at face value. Ask what assets are included or what assets are excluded. And more importantly, what can that wealth number do for someone's life? At the end of the day, it's not about money. It's about freedom, security, and the life you want to live. And the only number that really matters is your number and the number that gets you to the life you want to live. So what are your thoughts? Share them in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Having $1 million net worth in a rural. When I was in high school, I got teased for how I said rural and ruined. There's probably just inevitably things I'm going to say wrong for my entire life, and I've accepted it. So in other words, about 1 in 5 retirees has crossed that